Imagine slicing your skin not out of pain, but out of devotion. Imagine watching your own blood drip onto sacred paper as incense smoke curls into the sky and being told that this, not gold or war, is the price of keeping the gods alive. But for the Mayans, bloodletting was never senseless. It was sacred. It was beautiful, and sometimes it was terrifying. Carried out by kings, queens, and even commoners, bloodletting was the ritual heart of Mayan civilization. From royal palaces to jungle temples, from the tips of tongues to the tips of obsidian blades, they offered blood to speak to the gods. And the gods, they believed, were always listening. Royal bloodletting was repeated during major events: coronations, wars, eclipses, even droughts. The more critical the moment, the more intense the ritual. And the more blood that flowed, the greater the honor. The pain was not hidden, it was embraced in times of crisis. Or, in the wake of war, captured enemies were forced to bleed or worse. Sacrificial blood from warriors and captives was believed to hold intense spiritual power. Into the psychology of pain. Into the spiritual vision seen during these rituals. The Maya saw themselves as caretakers of the balance between the human and divine realms, and bloodletting was their most sacred way of maintaining that harmony. As strange and violent as it may seem to modern eyes, to the Maya, spilling blood was not an act of cruelty. It was a personal, sacred exchange, a dialogue with the gods, ancestors, and forces that govern nature itself. And into the tragic fall of the Maya civilization when the blood still flowed, but the gods stopped answering. They show kings pulling spiny ropes through their tongues, queens holding blood-stained paper, priests with obsidian blades raised to the sky. While male rulers often cut their tongues or penises, female royalty such as queens and high priestesses would perform bloodletting from their tongues or ears. This wasn't just ritual participation. It was a powerful statement that women, too, had direct access to the gods. In fact, some inscriptions suggest that queens were viewed as spiritual intermediaries between the earthly realm and the divine, especially during childbirth and royal transitions. They saw themselves fulfilling a cosmic obligation. Pain wasn't the point, connection was. A bloodletting ceremony was not a spectacle for cruelty, it was a conversation with eternity. As crops failed, cities emptied, and rulers lost control, priests and kings turned to the gods with greater desperation. In the highlands of Guatemala and the forests of the Yucatan, descendants of the ancient Maya still live. It's about what they believed that blood meant. It was power. It was peace. It was the price of existence. In every culture, we make sacrifices. We give up time, comfort, and safety for the things we love. The Mayans simply gave the most precious thing they had, their blood. They believed the gods once bled to give us life. So they bled to keep that life going, not for glory, not for fear, but for balance, for duty, for the belief that sacrifice is sacred. And in that belief, they built pyramids, cities, stories, and a legacy that still bleeds through time. And while the bloodletting ceremonies are no longer practiced in the old ways, elements of the ritual still survive in prayers, in fire ceremonies, and in the deep spiritual respect for the connection between humans and the natural world. The idea of sacrifice, lives on not through wounds, but through offerings, intention, and memory. They believed that more sacrifice would restore balance. But the gods remained silent. The skies did not bring rain. The cities did not recover. And so the rituals continued until there was no one left to perform them. And for those who believed the gods walked among them, it was a privilege to bleed. These weren't hidden events, they were central to society. A ruler who refused to bleed was seen as unworthy. They set fire to Mayan texts, destroyed temples, and tried to erase every trace of these rituals from memory. But despite their efforts, the legacy of bloodletting survived, etched into stone, passed through stories, and remembered in the bones of pyramids that still stand today. A priest who could not endure pain could not be trusted to communicate with the divine. The gods had shed their own blood in the act of creation, and now humanity had to repay that debt through ritual offerings. This belief was recorded in the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation myth, which described the gods shaping the world through sacrifice. After a victory in battle, enemy nobles or warriors were paraded before the city, bound and bloodied, before being sacrificed in public. Their blood, viewed as potent and rich with power, was believed to strengthen the gods and bless the city. In some ceremonies, their hearts were removed. But in many, they were simply bled, slowly pierced with thorns, obsidian, or stingray spines, while priests chanted prayers and lit fires. It was gruesome, but in the eyes of the Maya, it was sacred. As the blood-soaked paper caught flame, the smoke was believed to form a portal, a spiritual bridge that allowed the gods to receive the offering. Some even believed the smoke could carry prayers upward, connecting the human soul to the cosmic order. This wasn't superstition, it was theology. It was art. It was, to them, survival. And so, each time a priest or ruler pierced their skin, they weren't simply enduring pain, they were participating in creation, renewing the universe one drop at a time. Because in the end, the bloodletting wasn't about pain. It was about connection. And when that connection faded, so did the world they built. The more powerful the victim, the more powerful the offering. Some ceremonies even included auto-sacrifice followed by human sacrifice, combining royal devotion with political power. For the Mayans, to shed blood was to show strength, loyalty, and piety. Those who bled were not broken, they were blessed. For the ancient Maya, blood was more than life. It was the thread that bound humans to the divine. The Mayan calendar was extraordinarily advanced, tracking celestial movements with precision. On days when the sun aligned with sacred temples or when eclipses darkened the sky, the Mayans believed the gods were watching more closely. During these times, the elite would ascend temple steps and perform dramatic bloodletting ceremonies. High above the crowd, bathed in incense and firelight, rulers would slice their ears, tongues, or genitals, offering their blood as proof of loyalty and sacrifice. Obsidian blades, stingray spines, shark teeth, and ritual thorns were used for piercing. These weren't crude weapons. They were sacred instruments, often carved or inscribed, kept in temples or passed down through royal bloodlines. The act itself was highly choreographed. The wound, the collection of blood, the burning, and the prayers that followed. Even the location mattered. The top of pyramids, the steps of temples. These weren't just platforms, they were spiritual altars, built to bring the blood closer to the heavens. The Maya believed they lived in a cyclical universe, one constantly in need of balance between humans, gods, and nature. According to the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation story, the gods themselves shed blood to create humanity. In return, humans were expected to repay that divine sacrifice with their own blood. Life was a gift, and it came with a price. To bleed was to honor creation itself. A mother might pierce her tongue. A farmer might prick his ears. It was painful, yes, but it was purposeful. And among the elite, it became something even greater, a symbol of royal legitimacy. Or was this a society so deeply bound to ritual that it couldn't imagine life without it? What is undeniable is this: the practice worked for them. Cities thrived, crops grew. The Mayans developed one of the most sophisticated calendars, writing systems, and architectural legacies of the ancient world, all while offering their blood to the sky. A sign that rulers weren't just kings and queens, they were spiritual vessels who could speak with gods. Blood was the bridge. It nourished the gods, fed the ancestors, and healed the world. Without it, they believed, crops would fail, wars would be lost, and time itself could collapse. And offering it wasn't just ritual. It was duty. In our modern world, sacrifice sounds barbaric. To understand the Mayans, you must first understand their view of the cosmos. That's why bloodletting wasn't left to priests alone. It was an act of personal devotion, practiced even within households during festivals or spiritual emergencies. Nowhere was this more evident than in Yaxchilan, a powerful city-state deep in the rainforest. There, carved stone monuments reveal kings and queens performing bloodletting in graphic detail. One of the most famous is Lintel 24, a limestone relief showing Lady Zak, wife of King Shield Jaguar, pulling a thorn-covered rope through her tongue. Her husband holds a torch nearby, illuminating the moment. The blood that falls is collected on bark paper, which is then burned. The rising smoke was believed to open a portal, a doorway to the spirit world. This wasn't a one-time event. The tools were as symbolic as the act. But what drove them to such extremes? The answer lies in their mythology. Yet not all bloodletting was voluntary. And still, the question lingers, was it worth it? Did the gods really need blood? In Part 2, we'll dive deeper. In the ancient world of the Mayans, blood wasn't merely symbolic, it was believed to hold cosmic power. The act of bloodletting was part of a much broader worldview. To the Mayans, life came from sacrifice. These rituals were most common during key moments in the calendar. The blood was then collected on bark paper, which was folded and placed in a ceremonial bowl or burned. In cities like Yaxchilan, Palenque, and Copan, stone carvings and hieroglyphs depict these acts in astonishing detail. Even more fascinating is how gender played a role in these ceremonies. But the bloodletting wasn't always peaceful or voluntary. During periods of war or instability, captured enemies were often used in more extreme versions of the ritual. To outsiders, particularly the Spanish conquistadors who arrived in the 16th century, these rituals were horrifying. Catholic priests described them as demonic and savage. So, what did the Mayans see when they looked into the flame and felt their own blood spill? They saw sacrifice. They saw strength. As Mayan civilization declined in the late classical period between 800 and 1000 CE, bloodletting rituals became even more intense. Even after the fall of the great city-states, smaller Mayan communities survived. The story of Mayan bloodletting isn't just about ancient people spilling blood.